I signed my name on a discharge form in a hospital wing that had been closed for 3 years. 6 years later, I still believe that form is waiting for me, not in a filing cabinet, not in an archive, somewhere worse. I worked nights at St. Albin Memorial for 6 years, and I want to say up front that I am not a religious man. I never was. My mother was, and my wife is, but faith always felt like cold water to me, admirable in other people, not something I could step into myself. I bring this up because everything I am about to tell you happened to a man who did not believe in anything beyond what a flashlight could reach. And it happened anyway. Whatever lived inside St. Albin did not need my permission to be real. That is the part I still cannot stop turning over in my head. St. Albin was a county hospital on the eastern edge of a town called Pelham Falls, 60 miles from any city worth naming. It served 3 rural counties, and the truckers who blew their tires on the bypass and the meth cases the deputies didn't know what else to do with. It was 4 floors of mid-century brick with an addition tacked onto the south wing in the 80s, and you could tell from the inside which parts had been built when, because the older wings had thicker walls and softer light, and the newer ones felt like a strip mall pretending to be a clinic. I worked security, 12-hour shifts, 7 at night to 7 in the morning, 4 days on, 3 days off. My partner most nights was a man named Doyle, who was 62 and had been there 20 years and who could fall asleep standing up if you gave him a wall to lean on. I want to describe the hospital before I describe what happened, because the ordinary shape of it matters. The lobby had 2 vending machines, one that worked, and one that took your dollar and gave you nothing. Beside them was a fish tank that had not had fish in it since before I was hired. There was a small chapel on the 2nd floor with 12 folding chairs and a wooden cross the cleaning staff moved depending on which family was using the room. The cafeteria closed at 8. After that, food meant the 3rd floor break room, a microwave, and a coffee pot nobody ever cleaned. The morgue was in the basement. 2 cold rooms, an autopsy suite, and a little office full of steel file cabinets that never quite closed. The patient floors were 2, 3, and 4. 2 was medical surgical, 3 was a mix of long-term and step-down, and 4 was the wing they'd half closed in 2017 when the hospital lost its obstetric certification. 4 still had patients sometimes, when 2 and 3 filled up. But most nights it was dark and locked, and Doyle and I were the only ones with keys to the stairwell door. We were supposed to walk it once a shift. Doyle never did. He told me on my first week that the 4th floor was a waste of shoe leather, and that nothing happened up there that wasn't already happening on 3. He was right, mostly. For 5.5 years, he was right. The thing I want you to understand is that hospitals at night are not what people imagine. They are not full of screaming and lights and crash carts. They are quiet. They smell like floor cleaner and warm laundry, and the loudest sound for hours at a time is the ice machine in the 3rd floor break room cycling on and off. You hear the elevators. You hear the night nurses laughing at something on a phone. You hear sometimes a patient calling out from down a hall, and then the soft, fast footsteps of an aide going to them. Mostly, though, you hear nothing. You learn to live inside the nothing. You learn that nothing has its own rhythm, and you learn the rhythm so well that any small change in it stands up like a hand raised in a still room. The night I want to tell you about was a Tuesday in late October. I remember because the parking lot still had wet leaves stuck to it from the weekend's rain, and because Doyle had called out sick, actually sick, with the flu, which was unusual for him because he prided himself on never missing a shift, even when he should have. The supervisor told me they couldn't get a replacement on short notice and asked if I could handle it solo. I said yes. The hospital census that night was low. 2 had 11 patients, 3 had 9, 4 was empty, locked, dark. I had done plenty of solo nights before. There was nothing about it, in advance, that felt different. I started my rounds at 7:30. I walked the lobby, checked the chapel, walked the cafeteria, came back through the main corridor, and rode the elevator up to 2. The charge nurse on 2 was a woman named Ruth, who had been there longer than the building had been air-conditioned. She gave me a wave without looking up from her computer. I walked the hall, checked the stairwell doors, came back down. On 3, I waved at the night clerk, a young man named Devin, who was studying for his nursing boards and who always had a textbook open on the counter. He told me his wife was due in November and asked if I had any advice. I told him to sleep while he still could. He laughed. I rode the elevator back down to the lobby and sat at the security desk and ate the sandwich my wife had packed me. Turkey on rye with too much mustard, the way she knew I liked it. The first thing that was wrong, I want to be honest, was small enough that I did not notice it as wrong. It was after 11. I was doing my second walk of the night, and as I came down the main corridor toward the lobby, I passed the side hallway that led to the old admissions office, and I thought I saw a light on under the door. The admissions office hadn't been used in 3 years. They'd moved registration to a desk in the lobby when they cut staff. I tried the door. It was locked. The light, if there had been a light, was off now. I made a note in my log and kept walking. Old buildings have wiring that does what it wants. I had seen lights flicker on in empty rooms before. I had heard pipes that sounded like a person clearing their throat. I had a list by then of small things the building did, and I had stopped reacting to most of them. The second thing that was wrong, I noticed, but did not understand. At 12:45, I was at the security desk, and the phone rang. The internal line. The display said it was coming from extension 4127. The extensions on 4 all started with 41. I picked up. There was a pause, and then a woman's voice said very calmly, "Could you come up here, please? We need a witness." She did not sound afraid. She sounded the way a nurse sounds when she's calling about a fall, when the patient is fine, but the paperwork has to happen. I said, "Ma'am, 4 is closed tonight. Are you sure you have the right number?" She said, "Yes, thank you. We'll be waiting." And she hung up. I sat there with the receiver still in my hand. The lobby was quiet. Too quiet. Then I called the operator and asked her to check extension 4127. She put me on hold. The hold music clicked in and out like something breathing through a bad speaker. When she came back, she said the extension was inactive. It had been inactive since the wing closed. I asked if she was sure. She said yes. Then she asked if I was all right. I told her I was. I hung up. I want to describe what I felt then, because it matters for the rest of this. I did not feel afraid. I felt embarrassed, the way you feel when you realize you misheard something obvious. I assumed I had picked up a crossed line, or that the call had come from somewhere else and the display had glitched. The hospital's phone system was older than most of its patients. Things like that happened. I logged the call, time-stamped it, wrote, "Possible misdirected internal call, extension shows 4127, inactive," and went back to my walk. But I want to admit something. I did not go up to 4. I had a key. I had every right to. The protocol, technically, was to investigate any irregularity in a closed wing. I told myself that the call was a phone glitch and that there was nothing to investigate. The truth, which I did not let myself look at directly, was that I did not want to go up there. The voice had been too calm. The kind of calm a person uses when they already know you're going to do what they're asking. I finished my rounds without incident. At 3 in the morning, I made coffee in the third-floor break room and stood by the window and watched the parking lot lights buzz. Devin came in and refilled his mug and asked me if I'd ever seen anyone die. I told him I'd seen a man die in the lobby once, a heart attack, before the ambulance bay team got to him. Devin nodded the way young people nod when they're trying to look serious about something they haven't yet experienced. He said his grandmother had died on 4 back when it was still open. I asked him when. He said 2014. He said he still missed her. I told him I was sorry. He said it was a long time ago. He said it like he was trying to make it true. I went back down to the lobby, and the rest of the shift was quiet. I clocked out at 7, drove home, slept until 3 in the afternoon, and did not think about the phone call again until the next night, when it happened a second time. This time, it was 11:20. The display said 4127. I let it ring 4 times before I picked up. The same voice said, "Could you come up, please? We have a discharge that needs a witness signature. It won't take long." I said, "Ma'am, who is this?" She said, "I'm sorry, I thought they told you. We've been waiting since yesterday." She did not give a name. I said, "4 is closed. There's nobody up there." There was a small pause, and then she said, very gently, "There's somebody up here now. I'm going to tell you what I did, and I'm not going to defend it." I went up. I rode the elevator to 4. I need to describe that elevator because it was the first place my body understood something my mind had not accepted yet. The south elevator was slow. It always had been. Between the 3rd and 4th floors, it paused for 2 or 3 seconds, the way an old man pauses halfway up a staircase. I had ridden it hundreds of times, but that night, when it paused, the air changed. It got cooler, not freezing, not dramatic, just cooler, the way a room cools when someone opens a window somewhere else in the house. The doors opened on 4. I stepped out. The doors closed behind me, and I stood there in the dark with my flashlight in my hand, waiting for my eyes to adjust. 4 had not been gutted. That was the thing about it. When the hospital lost its OB certification, they didn't tear anything out. They turned off the lights, locked the patient rooms, capped the supply lines, and left everything else exactly where it had been. The nurses' station still had its monitors, dark and dust-skinned. The whiteboard behind it still had names on it from 2017, faded but readable, written in the handwriting of women who didn't work there anymore. There were still plastic baby bracelets in a bin on the counter. There was still a bouquet of dried flowers in a vase by the door of room 412, ribbons brown and curling, a card face down beside them. I walked the hall. My flashlight beam moved across the floor and the walls and the closed doors of patient rooms. And I called out, "Hello, this is security. Anyone up here?" My voice came back to me thinner than I expected. The hall ran the length of the wing, about 90 feet, and at the end of it was a small alcove with 2 chairs and a window that looked out over the back lot. Nothing moved. Nothing answered. I walked the whole hall, every door, and every door was locked. I checked the stairwell at the far end, and it was secure. I came back to the nurse's station and stood there and listened. The phone on the nurse's station rang. I want you to understand. The phone on a closed nurse's station, in a wing that had been dark for 3 years, with capped supply lines and dust on every surface, rang. The sound was not muffled. It was the loud, clean ring of a working hospital phone. I let it ring 4 times. I picked it up. The same woman's voice said, "Thank you for coming up. He's in 412. He's been ready for a while." I said, "Who is this? What's your name?" She said, "Margaret. I'm the charge nurse." Then she said, "You'll want to bring the clipboard from the desk. The discharge papers are on top." I looked down. There was a clipboard on the desk. There had not been a clipboard there 30 seconds before. I would swear to that under oath. I had stood at that desk for a full minute. I had looked at every surface of it. There had been a phone, an empty pen cup, a dust-covered keyboard, and a bin of plastic baby bracelets. No clipboard. But now it was there. The strange part was how clean it looked. Everything else on that desk wore 3 years of dust, but the paper on that clipboard was white, fresh, almost too white, like it had just come from a printer somewhere deeper in the dark. It had a name on it, a date, and a line at the bottom for a witness signature. The name was Harold Mercer. The date was today's. The line for the discharging physician had a signature on it that I could not read, the way doctor signatures are. The line for the witness was empty. I will tell you what I did, and again, I will not defend it. I picked up the clipboard. I do not know why. I think I picked it up because the alternative was to leave it there. And leaving it there felt in a way I could not have explained, like leaving a door open behind me. I picked it up and I walked down the hall to room 412. The door of 412 was open. It had been closed when I'd walked the hall the first time. I would swear to that too. I stood in the doorway and shined my flashlight inside, and I saw a hospital bed made up with white sheets, and an old man sitting on the edge of it with his feet on the floor. He was wearing a hospital gown and a thin gray robe, and he had house slippers on, the kind with the rubber soles. His hair was white and combed. His hands were folded in his lap. He looked up at me when the light hit him, and he smiled, the small, polite smile of a man who has been waiting a long time and is too well-mannered to complain about it. "There you are," he said. His voice was thin and warm. "I told them you'd come. They said you might not, but I told them you would." I said, "Sir, are you a patient here?" He said, "I was. I'm being discharged tonight." He nodded at the clipboard in my hand. "You have my paperwork. I just need a witness." I want to tell you exactly what he looked like, because this is the part that I have never been able to explain to anyone in a way that makes sense. He looked like a real man. He had liver spots on his hands. He had a small white stubble along his jaw, like he had not been shaved in a day or two. He had the slight tremor in his shoulders that very old men have when they sit upright for a long time. There was nothing wrong with him in a way I could point to. He did not glow. He did not flicker. He cast a shadow on the floor where my flashlight beam fell. He breathed. I could see his chest move under the robe. But the room he was sitting in had no power. The wall above his bed had no monitor lights. The IV pole next to him was empty. The tray table had nothing on it, not a cup of water, not a tissue box, not a remote. And the bed had been made, the sheets crisp and white, in a wing where no laundry had been delivered in 3 years. I said, "Sir, can you tell me your name?" He said, "Harold Mercer." I said, "And how long have you been here, Mr. Mercer?" He thought about this. He said, "I'm not sure anymore. A while. They've been very kind." He looked toward the door behind me, as if he expected to see someone there. Then he looked back at me and said, "My grandson works downstairs." I did not answer. He smiled, proud and tired. Did you know that? He is a good boy. He is going to be a nurse. I felt my hand tighten on the clipboard. I felt it the way you feel your hand on a railing when the staircase under you has just made a sound it shouldn't make. I said, your grandson. He said, Devin Mercer. He works on 3. He doesn't know I'm here. I didn't want him to see me like this. I asked them not to tell him. He smiled again, that small, polite smile. His grandmother was here. Did he tell you? She was here in 14. She passed in this room, actually. He patted the bed beside him. I sat right where you're standing. I held her hand. She told me she'd see me again. I want to be very precise about what happened next, because it is the moment everything in my life that came after it bent around. I looked at the clipboard in my hand. I looked at the line where the witness signature was supposed to go. I looked at the old man on the bed. And I understood, without anyone telling me, what would happen if I signed. I cannot tell you how I knew. I want to. I want to give you a clean explanation, the kind you could put in a report. The closest I can get is this. The room felt the way a courthouse feels. It felt official. It felt like a place where something was being processed, and the processing required a signature. And once the signature happened, the thing being processed would become real in a way it had not been real before. Harold Mercer was sitting on that bed because someone needed to witness him leaving it. And the only person on 3 whose grandmother had died in that room in 2014 was downstairs at the nurse's station with a textbook open on the counter, talking about his wife who was due in November. I said, Mr. Mercer, I need to step out for a minute. I'll be right back. He said, of course, take your time. I've waited this long. I walked out of room 412 and I walked back down the hall to the nurse's station, and I put the clipboard back on the desk where I had found it. I did not run. I want to be clear about that. I walked the way you walk past a dog you don't trust. I got back into the elevator and I rode it down to the lobby. And when the doors opened, I stood in the cab for a full 10 seconds before I could make my legs move. I went back to the security desk. I sat down. My hands were shaking. I picked up the phone and I called Devin on 3. He answered on the second ring. He sounded normal. He sounded young and tired and a little bored. I asked him if everything was okay up there. He said yes. I asked him if he was alone at the desk. He said Ruth had come up to ask him about a chart and had just left. I said, okay. I said I'd see him on rounds. I hung up. I sat at the desk and I made myself breathe. I made myself think. I told myself that I had imagined the old man. I told myself the clipboard had been there the whole time and I had simply missed it on my first pass. I told myself Devin's grandmother dying on 4 in 2014 was a coincidence and that the hospital had been open then, and any number of people had died in that room in the years it operated. I told myself a lot of things. None of them helped. What helped a little was the silence. The hospital was quiet. The phone did not ring again. At 5 in the morning, I went up to 3 and walked the hall and saw Devin at his desk reading his textbook. And he looked up and waved at me. And he was alive and ordinary. And he was going to be a nurse. And his wife was due in November. I went home at 7 and I did not tell my wife about any of it. I slept badly. I dreamed about the clipboard and about a line where my name was supposed to go and about a hand that was not mine signing it. I went back the next night because I could not afford not to. I had 2 car payments and a mortgage and a wife who was 3 years older than me and who had stopped working when her back went out. I went back the night after that and the night after that. For a week, nothing happened. The phone did not ring from 4127. I did not go up to 4. I told myself, with the part of myself that needed to keep going to work, that whatever had happened was over. Then, on the 8th night, Doyle came back from his flu, and I told him about it. I did not tell him the way I am telling you. I told him a sanitized version. I said I had taken a strange call from a closed wing and gone up and found a door open and called out and gotten no answer. I asked him if anything like that had ever happened to him. I expected him to laugh. I expected him to tell me I was tired and the building was old and the phones were trash. He didn't laugh. He looked at me for a long time. We were in the security office, a small windowless room behind the lobby with 2 desks and a wall of monitors. He was sitting in his chair with his arms crossed. He said, "Did you sign anything?" I said, "What?" He said, "Did you sign anything? A paper, a form, anything?" I said, "No." He let his arms drop. He said, "Good." I said, "Doyle." He said, "I'm only going to tell you this once, so listen. You don't go up there. You don't answer that line. If the operator calls you about extension 4127, you tell her the line is dead, and you log it as a phone error, and you stay at your desk. You understand?" I said, "Doyle, what is up there?" He looked at the dark 4th floor monitors. "It finds somebody who needs to leave. Then it finds somebody else to sign them out." "Why?" Doyle shook his head. "Because it needs a witness." He leaned closer. "And it does not choose cruel people. Cruel people say no. It chooses the kind ones, the tired ones, the ones who will help because helping is what they do." He looked back at me. "The wing closing did not stop it. I do not think anything stops it. I think it just waits." I said, "What happens if you sign?" He said, "The person on the paper isn't on the paper for nothing. They have to go somewhere when they get discharged. They go where the building tells them to go. And the witness—" He stopped. He rubbed his eyes. He said, "The witness is a witness. That's the whole point. You witnessed it. You agreed it happened. You gave it your name. After that, it knows who you are." I said, "Doyle, has somebody you know?" He said, "I'm not talking about that. I'm not ever going to talk about that. I'm telling you. You don't go up there. You don't answer the line. You hear me." I said I heard him. I want to tell you that I listened. For a while, I did. The phone did not ring again from 4127, not for a long time. I did my job. I walked my rounds. I waved at Devin on 3 and watched him fall asleep over his textbook and watched him wake up and apologize for it. I watched his wife come in one night in November to bring him a thermos of soup, and I watched her belly under her coat, and I felt something tight in my chest that I did not want to examine. I watched him show me the pictures from the ultrasound. A boy. They were going to name him Harold after his grandfather. I asked him where his grandfather was now. He said his grandfather had been in a memory care facility for almost 2 years and didn't recognize anyone anymore. But they were going to bring him to the hospital when the baby was born so he could meet him. He said his grandfather was the one who taught him how to play chess. He said his grandfather had told him, when he was 8, that being a nurse was a noble thing, and that was the reason he was studying. He said this with the slight embarrassment of a young man admitting that the reason for his life was a small, kind one. I went home that morning and I sat in my truck in the driveway for 20 minutes before I went inside. My wife asked me what was wrong. I told her I was tired. She put her hand on my face. She said, "You look like you've seen something." I told her I hadn't. She let it go. She always let it go. That's one of the things I loved about her, and one of the things I have come to understand was a kindness I did not deserve. It was the second week of December when the phone rang again from 4127. It was a Friday. Doyle was off. He had Fridays off. I was alone at the desk. The phone rang at 11:11. I let it ring 8 times. On the 9th ring, I picked it up because I could not stand the sound of it any longer. The same woman's voice, the one she'd called Margaret, said, "I'm sorry to bother you again. We have another discharge tonight. It's a young man this time. He's been with us a while." I said, "I'm not coming up." She said, "Oh." She sounded surprised, but politely so, the way a receptionist sounds when you cancel an appointment. She said, "All right, I understand. I'll let him know." She hung up. I sat at the desk and I waited for the relief to come. It did not come. What came instead was a feeling I did not have a name for at first. It was the feeling of having stepped off a curb without looking. The feeling of the second before you realize whether or not the car is going to hit you. At 11:30, I got up and I walked my rounds. Lobby clear, cafeteria clear, chapel clear. I rode up to 2. Ruth waved at me. I rode up to 3. The desk on 3 was empty. Devin's textbook was open on the counter. His coffee mug was beside it, half full, still warm when I touched it. His phone was face down on the desk. His chair was pushed back, the way you push your chair back when you stand up to do something quick and expect to come right back. He was not in the break room. He was not in the supply closet. He was not in any of the patient rooms. The patients on 3 were asleep, every one of them, undisturbed. I called Ruth on 2. I asked her if Devin had come down. She said no. She said she hadn't seen him since the start of the shift. I asked her to walk her hall and check the stairwells. She did. He wasn't there. I rode the elevator up to 4. I want to tell you that I went up there to save him. I want to be able to say that. The truth is more complicated. I went up there because I knew, before I pressed the button, that he was up there, and I knew that I had let him be up there. I had hung up the phone. The voice had said, "I'll let him know." I had thought she meant the patient. She had not meant the patient. She had meant Devin. She had told him there was a discharge, and Devin, who was 26 years old and going to be a nurse and had a grandfather in memory care and a wife pregnant with a son they were going to name Harold, had gone up to help. The elevator paused between 3 and 4. The cab got cold. The doors opened. The hall on 4 was lit, not brightly. The kind of dim, warm light a hospital hall has at night. The long fluorescence on their lowest setting. The floor waxed and reflecting. The nurse's station was occupied. There was a woman behind it. She was wearing scrubs that had been out of style for at least 15 years. The pattern with little teddy bears on it that the OB nurses used to wear. She had gray hair cut short and a face I could almost place. The way you almost place the face of someone who used to work at the grocery store you went to as a child. She was writing in a chart. She did not look up when I stepped out of the elevator. She said, "He's in 412. He's almost done. We just need your signature." I walked down the hall. I walked the way a man walks towards something he has already lost. The door of 412 was open. The light inside was on. I could see from the hallway the foot of the bed and a pair of feet in white sneakers and the hem of a pair of khaki pants, the kind Devin always wore. I want to tell you what I saw when I stepped into the room, and I want you to understand that I am telling you the truth, even though it does not make the kind of sense that truth is supposed to make. Devin was sitting on the edge of the bed. He was wearing his work clothes, the khakis and the polo shirt with the hospital logo on it, and his lanyard with his ID badge. He was holding his hands in his lap the way the old man had held his. He looked up at me when I came in, and he smiled, that same small, polite smile. And I will tell you that for one full second, I thought he was fine. I thought he had come up to investigate, the way I had, and he had found the room empty, and he had sat down on the bed to rest. And now I would tell him to get up, and we would go downstairs together and laugh about it. But the bed had no monitor above it, and the IV pole was empty, and the room had no power, and the light I had seen from the hallway had no source. And next to Devin, on the bed, was an old man in a hospital gown, lying back against the pillows with his eyes closed, his hands folded on his chest, his white hair combed. And on the tray table at the foot of the bed there was a clipboard, and on the clipboard there was a paper, and on the paper were two names. The first name was Harold Mercer. The second name was Harold Devin Mercer. The witness line was empty. I said, "Devin." He said, "Hey." He said it the way he said it when I came up on rounds and he'd been zoning out over his book. He said, "He came in on my shift. They said he'd been asking for me. I didn't know they had him here. I thought he was at Riverbend. They said he transferred over today and they didn't get a chance to call." His voice was perfectly normal. His voice was the voice of a young man explaining a small, ordinary mistake. He said, "He's leaving tonight. He recognized me, man. He hasn't recognized anybody in 2 years. He told me he was proud of me. He told me he wanted to see the baby." I said, "Devin, listen to me." He said, "I just need you to sign." Margaret said, "Any staff member can witness a family discharge. Your staff. It'll take a second." He was reaching for the clipboard. His hand was on it. He was lifting it toward me. I said, "Devin, that's not your grandfather." He stopped. His hand stopped. He looked at me. His face did something I have never been able to forget. It did not become afraid. It became confused. The small, clean confusion of a child who has been told that something he knows is true is not true. He said, "What?" I said, "Your grandfather is at Riverbend. He's at Riverbend right now. Call them. Use your phone. Call the night desk at Riverbend and ask for him." He said, "He transferred." I said, "Did anyone call you? Did your mother call you? Did the facility call you? Did anybody who is alive and who you can name call you tonight and tell you that?" He looked at the bed. He looked at the old man on the bed. The old man had not moved. The old man's chest was not rising. I do not know if it had ever been rising. The old man on the bed was not Harold Mercer. The old man on the bed was the same old man I had seen the first night, who had looked at me and smiled and asked me to sign him out and called himself by Devin's grandfather's name because that was the name that would work. That was the name that would bring the witness. That was the name that the building had reached into Devin and pulled out like a hook pulls a fish. Devin said, very quietly, "Margaret said he was here." I said, "Margaret is not real." He looked towards the door. The woman from the nurse's station was standing in the doorway. I had not heard her come down the hall. She was holding a pen. She was holding it out toward Devin, handle first, the way a nurse holds a pen out to a family member when the family member needs to sign. She was smiling. Her smile was kind. That was the worst part. It was not hungry. It was not angry. It was the kind of smile nurses give to families in bad rooms, the kind that says everything is normal because normal is what people need before they break. But her eyes were empty. She said, "Honey, it's all right. He has been waiting for you. You do not want him to go without saying goodbye, do you?" She held out the pen. "Just sign. It is only a formality." I will tell you now what I did not understand then, but understood later, in the months I spent trying to make sense of it. The thing in 412 was not a ghost. It did not haunt the room. It used the room. It used the room the way a spider uses a web. The web is not the spider. The web is what the spider has made to catch what it needs. The hospital, or whatever lived in the hospital, needed witnesses. And it needed the witnesses to be willing. And it needed the willing witnesses to be the kind of people who would sign a form for a stranger because a stranger had asked them politely. It found the people who needed somebody to come back. It found the grieving and the dutiful and the kind. It made them an offer. The offer was not the kind of offer you could refuse without believing in something you did not believe in. The offer was a clipboard and a name you knew, and a polite woman in old scrubs telling you it was only a formality. What I understood, standing in that doorway, was that Devin was about to sign. He was holding the pen. The woman had put it in his hand, and he had taken it the way you take a pen anyone hands you. He was looking at the line. He was breathing through his mouth. His eyes were wet. He was going to sign because he loved his grandfather, and because his grandfather was lying on the bed, and because his grandfather had said he was proud of him, and because he was 26 years old, and his wife was due in 2 weeks, and the world had been kind to him so far, and he had no reason yet to know that kindness could be a costume. I crossed the room, and I took the pen out of his hand. I want to tell you that I was brave. I was not brave. I was furious. I was furious in a way I had never been before and have not been since. And the fury was not at Devin, and it was not at the woman in the doorway, and it was not even at the thing on the bed. The fury was at myself. I had heard the phone ring at 11:11, and I had hung up. I had known in the part of myself that knew things I did not let myself say, that the call was not over. I had let the call be over because letting it be over was easier than going up. I had let Doyle's warning be enough, and I had told myself I was being responsible by listening to him, and what I had actually been was relieved. Relieved that someone had given me permission to do nothing. The cost of my relief was sitting on the bed in front of me with a pen in his hand. I took the pen. For 1 second, I just held it. I thought about Doyle's warning. I thought about Devin's wife, 2 weeks from giving birth. I thought about the boy they were going to name Harold. Then I looked at the woman in the doorway. She was still smiling. I looked at the clipboard on the bed. The line did not say Devin. It only said witness. I signed. I want you to understand that I knew what I was doing. I had thought about it for a week. I had thought about it every night since the first call. I had thought about what Doyle had said about the witness. I had thought about what the building wanted. The building wanted a name on a line. It did not specify, in the way that contracts do not specify, whose name. It said witness. I was a witness. I had witnessed Harold Mercer sit on the edge of a bed in a closed wing on a Tuesday night in October. I had witnessed him introduce himself. I had witnessed him ask. I had walked away from him, and I had not signed. And then I had hung up a phone and let a young man go in my place, and now I was standing in the room where my refusal had cost somebody something. And I signed. I signed my own name. I signed it on the line where Devin's name was supposed to go. The woman in the doorway stopped smiling. It was not dramatic. Her face did not change in any way you could draw. She simply stopped smiling. The smile went out of her the way a light goes out of a window. She looked at me, and for the first time I saw what was behind her face. And what was behind her face was nothing. Not malevolence, not hunger. Just the flat patient, nothing of a thing that was waiting to see if its instrument had worked. I had given it a signature. The signature was on the line. The form was complete. The form did not care which name was on it, as long as a name was on it. She said, "Thank you." She turned and walked back down the hall. I sat down on the bed next to Devin. The old man was gone. He had not stood up. He had not faded. He had simply not been there anymore. In the way that a thing you imagined is not there when you stop imagining it. The bed beside Devin was empty, and the sheets were flat. Devin was crying without making any sound. I put my arm around his shoulders. He leaned into me. He said, "What did I almost do?" I said, "Nothing." "You didn't do anything. It's done now." He said, "Why are you bleeding?" I looked at my hand. The pen had pierced the web of skin between my thumb and finger, somehow, in the press of signing. A small red mark, no bigger than a tick bite. It was not bleeding much. I said, "It's nothing. Let's go downstairs." I helped him up. We walked out of room 412. The hall on 4 was dark. The lights were off. The nurse's station was empty and dust-skinned, the way it had been for 3 years. The woman in the teddy bear scrubs was not there. The clipboard was not there. The pen in my pocket, when I checked the next morning, was a pen I did not own and could not identify. There was no manufacturer's name on it. I threw it in the river behind my house, and I have never gone back to look for it. I want to tell you the rest of what happened, because the story is not what happened on 4. The story is what happened after. Devin's son was born on the 18th of December, healthy and loud, 8 pounds and 4 ounces. They named him Harold. Devin's grandfather, at Riverbend Memory Care, died in his sleep on the 23rd of December, 4 days after the baby was born, and 1 day after Devin brought the baby to meet him. The hospice nurse said the old man had had a moment of clarity that morning. He had asked who the baby was. They had told him. He had smiled. He had said, "Tell him I'm proud of him." Then he had closed his eyes, and he had not opened them again. I went to the funeral. Devin asked me to come. I stood at the back of the chapel, and I watched a family I did not know cry over a man I had never met. And I thought about the old man on the bed in 412, the one with the combed white hair and the polite smile, who had known the right name to say. I thought about him for a long time. I have thought about him every day since. The thing I did to myself when I signed my name on that line was not what I thought it was. I thought I was substituting myself for Devin. I thought the building would take me instead. It did not take me. Not the way I expected. I went home that night and I slept and I woke up and I went to work and I did my rounds and nothing came for me. The phone did not ring from 4127 again. Doyle, when I told him what I had done, looked at me for a long time and then put his hand on my shoulder and said, "I'm sorry, son." I asked him what he meant. He did not answer. He retired 3 months later. He sent me a Christmas card every year until he died in 2022. The cards never said anything but "thinking of you, D." What was taken from me was smaller than my life and larger than my memory. It was certainty. I cannot trust my own house anymore. At night, I check the doors twice, then a third time, because some part of me believes that one night I will open the kitchen door and find a hospital hallway behind it. I cannot answer the phone without my chest tightening. I cannot hear the word witness without flinching. My wife thinks I have a nervous condition. The doctors gave me pills. The pills do not help. They are for a sickness in the brain. What is wrong with me is not in my brain. It is in the part of me that signed. I keep waiting. That is the part I have not told anyone, not Doyle, not my wife, not the priest she finally talked me into seeing, who listened to half my story before he stopped meeting my eyes. I keep waiting because I know what I signed. I signed a discharge. The discharge had a name on it. The name was mine. The form was complete. The form is somewhere in whatever drawer or ledger or unspeakable cabinet the building keeps such things in. And one night the phone is going to ring, and the woman with the polite voice is going to say, "Mr. Adler, I'm so sorry to bother you. We have your discharge ready. We just need someone to come up and witness it. It won't take long. And the worst thing, the thing I cannot stop turning over, the thing I am telling you because I cannot tell anyone who knows me, is that I do not know who she will call to do the witnessing. I do not know whose grandson I will be on that night. I do not know whose face the building will wear to bring them up to 4. I do not know what name they will see on the paper that will make them pick up the pen. I only know that they will be kind. That is the part that the building is good at. It only ever uses the kind ones. It only ever asks the people who would not say no. I retired from St. Albin 2 years ago. The hospital is still open. The 4th floor is still closed. Devin finished his nursing degree and works on the medical surgical wing now. His son Harold is 6. He sent me a picture last Christmas. The boy is missing his front teeth. He is holding a toy stethoscope. He's going to be a nurse, Devin says. He says it the way his grandfather said it about him, with that same small embarrassment, that small private pride. I keep the picture on my refrigerator. I look at it every morning. I look at the boy's face and I think about how I bought him, with the pen, with the line, with the name I signed that was not the name they wanted, but was a name they were willing to take. I think about the discharge in the drawer. I think about the phone that will ring. I am telling you this story because I want somebody to know, when it happens, what it was. When the phone rings and I go up and I do not come back down, I want somebody to know that I went willingly. I want somebody to know it was not a heart attack or a stroke or a fall in the bathtub. I want somebody to know that an old hospital in a small town has a room on a closed floor where the lights still work for the right kind of guest, and that the room has a bed, and the bed has a tray table, and the tray table has a clipboard, and the clipboard has my name on it, waiting the way it has been waiting for 6 years, the way it will keep waiting for as long as it takes. I want somebody to know that when I go, I will go the way Harold Mercer went. I will sit on the edge of the bed in my robe and my slippers. I will fold my hands in my lap. I will smile the small, polite smile of a man who has been waiting a long time. And somebody will come. Somebody kind, somebody tired, somebody who works the night shift and still believes helping is the same thing as doing good. They will step into room 412 with a flashlight in their hand. They will see me. I will look up at them. I will hold out the pen. And very gently, the way the old man said it to me, I will say, "There you are. I told them you'd come."